you'd like to hear the ocean song again, snap mountain trails that touch the wind, cast her heart down long winding country roads. From this window frame our sunset views, tapestries of places.
But it's been a while. Does anybody have a preference? Does anybody want to take a vote or shout a thought, an idea out? What would you like to see today?
Well, I'd like to see you walk down further so we can see more.
Okay. We could also go up top on one or more of the ships if you want a good view from up there too.
Oh, that might be nice.
It's not too windy today, JR, so I think the sound should be okay. So we could go all the way down the pier if you want to go all the way out. We could go up to the top of the ferry boat if you want to see the view from up there.
You guys just jump right in and direct this one.
Anybody besides me have an opinion?
I'm just open.
Yeah, okay, well, to help maybe just get some clarity here, starting with the ferry boat, just to give you a brief idea about that. It's a San Francisco Bay ferry boat. As far as we know, it's the largest floating wooden structure in the world. Even though it is a steam-powered ship, it is a wooden vessel. Originally built in 1890 and last used in 1957. It was an automobile ferry boat when it was last used, and originally it carried trains back and forth across San Francisco Bay. So that's sort of a lowdown on that one. Towards the end of the pier, if we head down that way, we've also got the sailing ship that you should be able to see. It's the one with the yellow painted masts all the way down there. And it was a cargo ship, although we often get questions about Johnny Depp and Pirates of the Caribbean. I guess, to be honest, those questions do try our nerves a little bit sometimes. Although we do have a connection to those movies because one of our riggers was employed and helped rig up the ships on those movies. So we actually do have a connection to that.
Oh, wow.
But the real story behind that ship is a lot less colorful than Johnny Depp. It was a cargo ship. But maybe just as colorful as where it went to do that job of carrying cargo, which is around Cape Horn, bottom of South America.
Wow.
So you're talking storms where you're dealing with 80-foot waves and winds over 100 miles per hour. So as a straightforward cargo ship, it does have some colorful history there. And its last career was with the Alaska Packers Association. And it was involved with a story that would be classified as something called debt peonage. And if you haven't heard that before, it's basically an economic form of slavery where people are forced into debt that they can never work their way out of. So that ship and its history covers a huge amount of ground. But it's got some good views from on deck down there too, as well as the end of the pier. So those are the two ships that we're kind of thinking of right now. If you want a view, we can either go way out or we can go way up. That's, I guess, where it comes down to.
What do you think?
You can do whatever you want, as long as it's what Zoe wants.
I'm up for either way out or way up.
Well, the first thing Zoe is to go way out. So did you want to stick with that?
Sure.
Sure. Shall we start walking?
Chris's mom, give him instructions. Tell him what to do.
Oh, that still happens. For those who haven't been on one of the High Street programs before, or it's been a really long time, the pier itself has a fair amount of history here. The ferry boat is actually the only ship that historically belongs at this dock. Before the Golden Gate Bridge was built, which we'll show you at some point during the program. You're getting that? Okay. Before the Golden Gate Bridge was built, that crosses the bay in a north-south direction, right at the entrance into the bay. This particular pier, Hyde Street Pier, was Highway 101. So this is where you would drive your car and drive it on board a ferry boat, just like the Eureka here. So we do have an antique car collection on board to tell about that history. So High Street Pier was built specifically for that. When the bridges got built, it pretty quickly went out of business. And it was let's see, I'm getting my dates here a little mixed up. 1941, I believe, was the last voyage of the Eureka here, going across the bay to Sausalito. Now, I don't mean to get things kind of confused. It was not the last ferry boat voyage across the bay, but it was that specific route. Because the Golden Gate Bridge just siphoned all the traffic away from that particular ferry boat route. But the Eureka soldiered on going over to Oakland, which is to the east of here, until 1957. But the ferry boat, therefore, has a really long history, but it was the bridges that kind of brought that history to a close. And for those that are unfamiliar with the Golden Gate Bridge specifically, we just had two of our staff, Ann Monk and Sabrina Oliveros, two really talented young rangers here, put together a podcast about the history of the bridge. So if you're curious about that, you can look for that on our website. But we get a lot of questions about the bridge, not just how to get there and how to visit it, but just about the bridge itself, especially the name. The bridge is actually named after its location. So people are often expecting a kind of a golden color, and they actually see what its real color is, and you can kind of see what's going on in their mind by looking at their face. I mean, it's just a big, huge question mark. The color is actually something called international orange. I'm not sure of the history of that particular color. Please don't test my knowledge on that because I've already reached it. But it's called international orange, but it's called the Golden Gate because the entrance into the bay, that strait of water, is called the Golden Gate. So it's actually named after its location, not its color.
I love how it was hidden historically by the fog for so long, before they found the bay.
There is a long history of not seeing something like that, not just the bridge itself, but the entrance into the bay. The first European explorer to come up this way was Juan Rodriguez Cabrillo, and they think he got as far as Point Reyes, at least on his first leg of the journey. But there's no mention of San Francisco Bay. It took a land expedition to discover it. So the fog that's so prevalent here might have been one of the reasons why that bridge went that strait of water went undetected. Of course, the strait's about a mile wide, which seems long, but it's really not that wide. And we've got a bunch of hills over in Oakland and Berkeley area, straight east of the Golden Gate, and those hills might have helped camouflage the entrance into the bay as well. Today, it's often invisible because of the fog, but people still know the bridge and the strait are there. But you're absolutely right. It's often hidden.
Can you hear the new singing?
Say that one more time.
Can you hear the new singing of the railings from there?
No. Yeah, I did hear about that, that news about the kind of singing of the bridge and the high winds. I forget which bridge it was, whether it was in the Pacific Northwest of the U.S. or somewhere else. There was one bridge that reacted violently to high winds, and there's actually film footage of the Tacoma Narrows, bridge. And it was just, here, can't describe it, but the bridge in that film footage is literally doing this.
Yeah.
And just the weirdest thing to see, and finally it just shakes itself to pieces. And so that was going to concern the other bridges, including the Golden Gate, did that. There is some film footage of the Golden Gate very gently doing a similar motion, not nearly as extreme. So they began putting in baffles and some other stuff to counteract those forces in high winds. But from what I understand, the high winds through the rigging of the bridge and through those baffles, it does make these notes. So it sounds like the bridge is singing a little bit. So yeah, you can't hear it from here. We're too far away from that, but that is an interesting phenomenon. Might still go on to Balclutha, but J.R., did you want to walk down to the end of the pier first? That was the primary request, so maybe you want to do that first? Yeah.
I got a question for you. Have the sea lions or other critters like that taken advantage of people not being around?
Oh, they take advantage all the time. Maybe even more so. Since the shutdown, I'm actually trying to look right now. And Dadgummit, it's just like the one time I haven't seen any sea lions here. You can see some of the damage they've caused. Yeah, they are quite frequent. So yeah, JR is not going to be able to capture the side of one right now unless maybe near the end of our tour. But if you look down at this floating dock here, you can see that darkly colored area. That's due to a lot of the water that they brought up and maybe oils and stuff on their skin. But you can see the ropes along the edge of the dock are kind of chaotic and torn down, and that's because of the sea lions coming up onto the dock. They've torn those railings off and their stanchions off.
And I don't know if my voice comes up on your phone, but that pier that we're looking at is a Pier 49 fire.
Okay, did the rest of you catch news of the big fire in San Francisco on one of the docks recently?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you look, JR's got the camera, but if you look over towards that dock that's got that white and red tour boat, can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's the dock where the fire was. And you can see the kind of warehouses that are on that dock behind that tour boat. The building that burned was directly opposite of that building. So you can't quite see it from here. But the fire was literally right next to that warehouse that you do see.
Wow.
Which one burned?
It was a warehouse on that very dock just behind that red and white tour boat.
No, I was wondering which dock it was.
Pier 41 is what it's called.
Right next to the submarine.
Oh. Okay.
All righty, what else can we take in down here? Might cover it for the sea lions. Yeah. Yeah, JR and I are talking. We're both surprised there's not any here. I don't know if we got any of our small boat folks in today, but they come down to do maintenance checks and work on the small craft here. And that might have shooed them away.
Are you going to be sailing anytime soon?
Short answer is no. We do a fair amount of sailing here, mostly with the Alma, this big two-masted vessel right here, the white, red, and green one. We had done public sails on that for many years in a row. We weren't quite sure if that was going to happen this coming year or not. If it does not happen, that vessel there, the Alma, will still be doing sails on the bay, kind of showing the Park Service flag around. Of course, everything depends on the pandemic too, and what happens with that and how quickly we can get back to things. So we will be doing some sailing, but not quite like what we were. So more no is the answer as far as the public is concerned.
Question about how close the fire was.
Okay, so a question JR just passed on to me about how close the fire was to Pampanito. Really close. There were two museum ships over at Pier 41. One was the Pampanito, which is a World War II submarine, which we've done tours of frequently. The other was a cargo ship of a type that's known as a Liberty ship. That's one of two survivors from World War II. They built 2,700 of that one particular design, which was meant to basically build more than German submarines could sink during the Battle of the Atlantic. And that ship's name is Jeremiah O'Brien. It's one of the few surviving ships that transported cargo to the Normandy beaches at D-Day in 1944. And the Jeremiah O'Brien was the ship that was really threatened by that fire, because right where that warehouse was, that was where the Jeremiah O'Brien Liberty ship was docked, right beside that building. But they were able to save the Jeremiah O'Brien. There was no damage at all to that vessel. And in part that was due not just to the firefighters working on the dock, but to the fire boats that came and responded and were able to spray water and shield the O'Brien. The Pampanito was right in front of the Jeremiah O'Brien, so it was still really close. Although Pampanito was never directly threatened, it was really, really close. So hope that answers that question for you. Now, while JR's pointed the camera at me, you can kind of see a ship that we might take a walk on, the Valclutha here. We have done tours of this one in the past as well. But this is, I think, one of the best angles of the ship. I mean, it's just a really grand angle here. You can see how sleek the vessel looks, even from looking towards the back here, the stern, looking forward on it. And as I mentioned before, people get often excited and ask us about Johnny Depp, and they look rather deflated when we say cargo ship. Yeah, it doesn't seem to have a whole lot of drama to it, but you'd be surprised how much drama a regular cargo voyage can have, especially during this particular time period, because it's an interesting mix of technology and tradition. On the one hand, it's totally traditional. There's no engine whatsoever on it. It was entirely wind powered, and handle the sails, raise the anchor, load cargo, or at least move cargo around to a certain degree. It was all a manual process. They did have mechanical advantage, but all the power was by muscle. But it's extraordinarily modern in that what you're looking at right there is a steel ship. It's not wood. And so this story of this ship is one of the really fun ones that we tell here, especially when we compare it to others. So between the sailing ship and the ferry boat,
Get closer to them.
yeah, you want to walk a little closer?
Yeah, go down
So-
and go and keep talking while you're showing it.
One of the really, well, for me, because I love this subject, it's kind of mind-blowing, but for the average visitor, it's still a big surprise. When they come to Hyde Street Pier and they see this sailing ship and it's made of steel, while they look at the steam-powered ferry boat that's made of wood. And that's real surprise. A sailing ship steel and a steamship wood. They usually think of that being the other way around. The ferry boat, though, was built right here in San Francisco Bay in Tiburon, which is directly behind JR right now across the bay. But this ship right here, I'm not sure, can we actually see it on the stern? Okay, JR's going to back up just a little bit, but you can see the name of the ship on the stern, Balclutha, but right next to it, you can see its original home port. Can you guys see that all right? You see what it says?
Not really.
No, we can't see what it says.
All right. But you can see the brass letters there. Balclutha is the first part of that, but to the right of Balclutha is the home port, which is Glasgow, Scotland.
Wow.
The ship was built right near Glasgow, and in fact, that's how the ship got its name. Balclutha is a Scottish Gaelic word that roughly translates as town on the River Clyde. So it's named after where it was built and how it ended up in a U.S. national park.
Look up. Look way up.
Look up there. How it ended up
Well,
as a part of a U.S. national park is just really a huge surprise, because unless the ship was built here or substantially reconstructed here, it's not allowed to fly the U.S. flag on it. And the
What year was it built?
The year it was built in 1886. So it's right at that transition between iron to steel, and just before steam power took over from sailing power. So this is really that last era, not the very end of it, but pretty close, before steam power took over things. But when the British owners were no longer making the amount of money they needed from it, they did sell it. That's how it began its transition to American ownership. But it couldn't do that directly because there were laws that prevented non-American ships from flying the U.S. So the first thing they did was the American owners purchased it and placed the ship under the registration of the Hawaiian flag. And a few years later, Congress dealt with the fact that Hawaii had been annexed and was now a part of the U.S., and they allowed Hawaiian flag ships to switch to the American flag. I paused, so maybe and our park rangers blab a lot, but I did actually stop talking for a bit.
Okay. How long is this ship?
I don't remember the exact figure off the top of my head. It's just shy of 300 feet when you go from the end of the rigging on the back to the end of the rigging on the front. But the waterline length is a little bit shorter than that, so it's probably in the range of 270 or so feet.
I want to say,
Okay.
265.
Okay, JR's seems to recall 265.
I think it's I always get it mixed up. I think Val's 265 and Thayer's 156. And I always get the 56 and 65.
I have that trouble too. JR's relating. I mean, we got multiple ships here, and when it comes to bare facts like that, you know, especially for the bigger ships. Okay, was it 265 for this ship or was it 265 for that ship? It's especially when the park's been closed for 3 months now. It's hard to remember.
Yeah.
But the ships and measurements is a very esoteric and confusing subject too, because they've got, you know, length on deck, they got length between perpendiculars, they got sparred length, Even when you want to measure a ship for its overall size or weight, they've got displacement tonnage, they got gross tonnage, they got dead weight tonnage.
Look up and show me the sails, the rigging.
Okay, he heard you, there he goes.
Wow.
That's
And
a
that's
big
as tall
mast.
as it normally would be. So
Wow.
again, I'm not sure what the resolution coming through the camera is, but can you guys make out that little ring at the very top?
Yeah.
Yep.
That ring would normally be filled by another section of the mast going even further up, about maybe close to a third the total length, total height there.
Wow.
With everything
Incredible.
fully rigged up, you're talking about, JR, what do you think? 120 feet up or so?
166 from the base of the mast, so I'm not sure above that how.
Okay, we're getting into our figures again, because are we talking about above the water, above the deck? Are we talking about the full height of the mast? And if that's the case, you got to remember the mast goes down to the bottom of the ship. So the actual height is even a debatable thing. What do you mean by height? But from the base of the mast all the way to the very top of the mast, JR recalls 160 something, you said?
I want to say it's 166.
166. And that's below the water line. So from the very base of the mast itself at the bottom of the ship, 166 up to the top.
Well, so you'll fact check you. Don't you worry.
Yeah, fact check me. It's good for me. I'm stretching my brain. I've just been done any work in so long. I'm forgetting everything. So yeah, fact check me. It'll help me learn too. I don't mind a good fact check.
Carry on, guys.
All right.
But how people we say in the hole? Probably what? 2.5 yards, probably 30 feet below.
Well, that's depth of hold, yes. JR, do you want to focus on that drawing right there? They can get an idea what we're talking about. Put my mask on so I can get closer to you. Okay, so JR is going to zoom in here, well, walk up to this drawing. And the purpose of this drawing is really to show you how the ship can list with the pressure of the wind on the sails. But I'm going to stick my finger right in here. Can you see?
Yep.
There's the water. So are you measuring the height of the mast from the water line or from the deck or down here where the mast actually sits at the bottom of the ship? And if it's the water line, that can change too. It depends if the ship is fully loaded or not and how deep the ship is sitting in the water. So there's a lot of leeway, pardon the pun, when you're talking about the height or length of something. It depends on exactly how you define where you started the measurements from.
Look at that lean.
That lean with the wind there, and the wind is this arrow here. That actually, to a degree, does help the sailors. Because if you look at how the sailors would climb up the mast and the shrouds, you want to capture that, JR? So, I don't have my climbing gear on, so I'm not going to get outboard here. But these cables are called shrouds, and they help support the mast on the side. But they also have got these metal fittings here, so they can use them, the shrouds like ladders and climb up there, which is pretty steep enough as it is. But when the wind is blowing on the sails and the ship leans over, like you saw in that picture, that can help, but it can also endanger the sailors, depending on how smart they are. But if the sailors are smart, first and foremost, what they're going to do is figure out what direction the wind is coming from, because that's the same side they want to climb on. Because if you're climbing up the shrouds, you don't want the wind blowing in your face, because if you slip, the wind's going to push you away and off into the water. You always want the wind on your back. So if you do slip, you get blown towards what you're climbing on, not away. So that's the number one thing for safety. But when the ship is leaning so far over, that also helps, because it makes it so that these things are not quite so steep to climb up. It makes it a little bit easier, a little bit more gentle of a slope. So the environment that you're sailing in, the weather that you're sailing in, it can all impact the amount of effort that you have to put into the task, but also your safety. So number one for all of that is always climb on the windward side. So first rule about climbing up, you don't want the wind in your face. So that's the number one idea there. What else can we talk about? Yeah, let's talk to the wheel. So we're going to head aft or to the back end of the ship here, which is something else people find surprising. And JR, this top step here, there's a B. So just be aware of that guy. So a lot of people are really surprised. There's Mr. B. Can you guys see that?
Aw. Getting some minerals off of the metal.
That's a good question.
Got blown off course.
Is he cleaning himself up there?
It really looks like it's feeding off of something.
If the wind gets too strong, folks, and you can't hear me too well, just let me know. I've got my microphone in my pocket, so hopefully that'll protect it some.
So far, so good.
So another confusing thing about sailing ships is when people want to see the steering wheel, and so we start walking to the back end of the ship, and that confuses a lot of people because they're used to sitting in the car and looking out the front. But on a sailing vessel, there's a lot of advantages to having the wheel at the back. First of all, because the rudder that you use to steer the ship through the water is at the back of the ship. So mechanically, having the wheel right above it has a lot of advantages. But secondly, the guy who's steering the ship, his job is not to actually see where he's going. That's not up to him. His job is to respond to the order of the officer of the watch, officer of the deck. And so that officer might be, for example, where JR is standing right now. So you can probably see the wheel, right? Can you guys see that?
Yep.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have JR turn around. Take a look at my beautiful physique. But now he's facing all the way forward. Can you see the Transamerica building through the rigging?
Yeah.
That
Yep.
building? So JR is standing right by the chart house. He's within easy shouting distance of the guy on the wheel. And from where he's standing, he's got a perfect view of everything that he needs to see. So the officer who's in charge of that particular watch, he's the one that decides how to steer the ship, and he will then shout commands to the guy on the wheel. Some of those commands might actually be to steer a certain direction, or they might be to steer by the wind conditions on the sails. And if that's the case, then the guy who's actually got his hands on the steering wheel will need to look up at the sails. And if he's at the back of the ship, all he does is simply look up. If the steering wheel was at the front of the ship, he'd have to turn around and look behind him. So these are all really good examples of reasons why the wheel at the back of the ship is the preferred location, not the front. Let me take a closer look at the wheel here. Yeah, the seagulls think we're trespassing. All right, so yet another confusing thing about the wheel. I'm backwards. You do not want to stand in front of the wheel. Right? Stand to the side and behind. I'm sure if you would have told them what it was, they would have loved power steering. They didn't have that. It's just a mechanical gearing inside this box here, but it's all manual. So in many cases, if you were the guy on the wheel, I'm able to turn this really easily right now, but if you're in heavy seas, you might actually have to put your body weight into the wheel. And you need to think of this as leverage. So if you look at the actual handles right here, it's a lever that goes right down to the middle of the wheel. That's a really long lever. And so the sailor is going to take advantage of that. By standing to the side, he can actually put his whole body weight into turning that wheel if he needs to. But in really heavy seas, he might also need to keep a kind of a light hand on the wheel and stand back on these spokes. Because if a big wave hit the rudder, it could give the wheel a kick. And without warning, this thing can start spinning. And there have been a few stories where sailors were holding on too tightly and the wheel gave a kick and threw them over the top of the wheel. Because they were holding on and the wheel gave over. So you do stand behind to the side. Day like today, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. But in heavy weather, you probably stand a bit more like this. You might have two guys, one on each side of the wheel to handle this thing. So you must give the wheel respect. Something else that's one of the more artistic pieces on board is where these sailors would be looking if they were told to steer a certain compass course. This item right here is called a binnacle, and in the middle here is where you would have your compass. So having it right in front of the wheel so they can look straight down at the compass course, the perfect placement. But if you look at the legs down here, it's one of the more beautiful things on board the ship. These stylized dolphins. Nowhere near anatomically correct. We will admit that. But a pretty common
A sea
decorative
dragon.
feature on many
Sea serpent.
Yeah, it looks more like a sea serpent, but they're always described as dolphins. They look actually somewhat similar to the dolphins of a submarine sailor. When a Navy sailor qualifies to be on board a submarine, they're then allowed to wear a pin on their shirt, the dolphin pin, and it's two stylized dolphins that don't look too dissimilar from the faces of these dolphins here.
I see a hole I see a hole in their noses. What is that from or for?
No, if you look down here, this was another fastener, but the main fasteners down here had a link into the deck, but this is probably another screw position, because in heavy weather, you might just want to make sure this isn't going to move in with any waves that come over the deck here. Another screw location. How are we doing on time? We got plenty?
We got another 15, 20.
So we step aside. All right, let's go show you some more fanciness. The Dolphins is just the first page. Okay, so JR said he was in there. It's true. If you can't see anything, let us know, but hopefully the camera will adjust. Let's take a look. Maybe what we can do, we'll get closer, we'll unlock the stage door and actually walk into the stage. Now, if he falls, and he's not hurt, I'll be laughing. This is one of the fearful things of live programs like this. You definitely are hoping nothing goes wrong, because it's not like you can re-record it. You guys see that all right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Slip behind you here. So they are giving me a peek into the captain's cabin. And I think this whole tour is one about confusions that a lot of visitors have.
You might want to take the phone out of your pocket and just talk into it.
Hold on, unlock it in here. All right. Okay.
Or maybe it was mine.
Okay. Now, one of the confusing things about the captain's cabin is that on a ship like this, it was not a single room. It was actually a whole suite, almost an apartment. So, oh, you're right. Sorry, Jay. Okay. So this space right here is the actual cabin. This is the sleeping room of the captain, but this is not his only space. His bed over there is in a corner. It's the only double berth on board the ship, and that's because his family often accompanied him, so his wife would share this room with him. So it's the only double wide bed on the ship. But the fittings of this room are really quite amazing too. You can see all the paneling here in the room, the furniture that's built in. It's just 2 or 3 steps in beauty above what the crew would have with their comfort. The crew had practically nothing. This is part of the ship that represents the company. So it's not just to give the captain comfort for his responsibilities, although it's partly that. But the main reason is that this was where the captain would invite guests, especially business people that he's trying to sell cargo to or buy cargo from. Maybe not inviting them per se into the actual sleeping area, but if JR will step to the right into the dining saloon, that is the real company office down here. All right. So normally the dining saloon is caged off. The cage is still up. Maybe you saw some of that as Jay was walking past, but we got the keys. We're going to take you into the main area.
Oh,
All right. I will be opening here and admit that JR is focusing on my favorite detail, which is the bottle rack. So
Got to keep
looks
them
like it's
safe.
hopefully it won't fall down. But if you look closely, you'll see that this rack is on hinges. So as the ship rolled, this would stay level. So I guess when it comes to making sure certain things, but I thought that the skylight, which has etched windows, and now today, as an example, we don't have all the lights on down here. Most light that we have is coming from the skylight, so it's actually showing you exactly why this skylight was here. Because otherwise, they would have had oil burning lamps down here, and the oil was expensive and somewhat dangerous because you're on a ship. So they used natural light as much as possible, wherever possible. Now, elsewhere in the room, I guess back here has got a little bit of light on it. Let me point to. What's that? Avoid that. Okay, got it. So if you look at the paneling here, this is a combination of woods. It's got oak, teak, mahogany, and bird's eye maple, which is that center paneling. Yeah, Jared's going to get a close-up there. And if you look at the engaged columns that help frame it with those gold-painted capitals there, everything about this place is fancy. And a lot of people, they do assume, as I mentioned before, that this is all meant
Look at that bird's eye.
to people often assume it's meant for just, but in here, this is where business will be conducted. They do want to make the captain feel comfortable. He's the all responsible person on the ship. But this is also where you would buy and sell cargo. And the last thing you want to do is give a bad impression of the successful level of your business to people that you're trying to sell or buy from in any port around the world. So when you are buying or selling, this is the place where you bring important, just like any major here in San Francisco. If it's a major business office, it's not going to be a little cubbyhole. It's not going to be a tiny, dingy little room. It's going to be a pretty opulent looking space because you're trying to impress the people you want to do that business with. And the same story happens here. So that's a big reason this place looks the way it does. It's got the bottle rack, the red velvet furniture, even the deck. So JR, if you'll pan down and look at where your feet are, let them show exactly what you're standing on. If you look, can you see the planking there underneath JR's feet?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Given the planking on ships, they have to find a way to make it watertight, and usually they would just hammer oakum, which is a hemp fiber, into the seam, and then pour in something on top. And mostly that's black pitch, but this one room has white caulking. So from the skylight to the paneling, right down to the white caulking that you step on, everything about this place, top to bottom, is meant to impress. This is the only place. So, JR, if you just walk to the open door we came through,
Wait a minute.
it's just this room.
I have a question. That little stove, is that for coal?
Most likely, yes, for coal, for heating. As the ship is restored right now, the smokestack doesn't come out the top. So it's it's a little confusing right now. We're not quite sure what the arrangement would have been. But this would have been the only heating source in here. Again, this is not a steam-powered ship. There is no engine, so the only heat you got is in the galley where they cook in little heating stoves like this. I'm not sure if the lower one will open or not.
I think you'd still be pretty cold.
No, that little sucker would put out quite a bit of heat.
What's noteworthy is that you rarely saw little stoves like this where the sailors would live. Primarily just back here, unless you were friends with the cook, he might allow you to hang out in the galley sometimes and be warm. All right, but back at the doorway that I was telling JR, asking if he would take a look at the deck. So this room has that white caulking in the deck seams, but stepping through that one door, it goes back to just the regular black pitch.
Mm.
This is the room where business was conducted. That room that JR is looking into is where the captain's kids would live, which itself is another surprise. We do know there were 2 kids born on this ship.
Wow.
Now, something that's, we'll go all the way back. I don't think we've actually gone all the way back before. Okay, this is not set up as a museum space. It's not prettiest, but you are able to see the structure of the ship, especially that fan-like structure at the very back. It's something that they call a counter stern. It's like a counter that overhangs the back end of the ship. And even though it's not as pretty as the rest of the ship right now because it's not set up for visitors, it is amazing to look at. It's something that very few people get to look around. So I'm going to hold my voice right now as JR steps in. I'm just going to allow him to give you a quick look around here.
Oh, look at those tools.
I know.
Oh my goodness.
I think we just found a left-handed monkey wrench.
So, JR, yeah, if you look down first, JR, if you guys can see the framing right here, and how it fans out, it's kind of curved. So right where my feet are right here, I'm standing over the very back end of the ship that actually sits in the water. Everything else that you see in this room is actually hanging off the back end of the ship. This green shaft right here is where the steering wheel connects down straight below to the rudder. So this is the rudder shaft right here, coming from the wheel above.
Wow, this is great to be able to see this.
Yeah, I don't think we've shown you guys this space before. So right above our head, the hatch. This is the hatch that I stepped right at. Okay, so certified for bosun stores. Can you guys see that writing at all? Does that come across?
No, not really. Barely.
Yeah. There it is.
Certified for
Bosun stores. Okay, so the bosun is the leading deckhand. So bosun stores could mean sails, it could mean tons of rope, all sorts of gear for handling the ship and sailing the ship. But it's noteworthy that right outside and above is the hatchway. And if you look really close, you'll see right here, there's a roller. Right? So in this room right over here might have been storage for a lot of rope, maybe some of the sails. And they've got this big roller at the top of the door so that they can pull it directly through the door and up the hatch without any chafe. So this is one of the
Oh,
details
clever.
that's really fun to come across, because in some cases you can see the writing and know what the room was for, but then you kind of look for these details like the roller, and it gives you a much better idea of physically how they designed structure into the ship to achieve a certain job. And just seeing this roller is just one of those neat little things here. And then if you look at the door frame, you can actually also see the door frame is a little curved and chafed right here. It looks like this part of the door frame is extra thick because it saw a lot of wear and tear. And maybe this is where a lot of rope was dragged through from space to space. So if you look closely in these structures, you can see little details that tell you some of these stories.
Cool.
There's another hatch below us.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so there's a hatch below us that gave access to some of the ship's stowage space down below deck. And that's different from cargo space. They would have separated out stowage for the needs of the ship versus cargo. This is one of the hatches that would have given access to what the crew would have needed to store down below deck. I don't even know if it's loose or not, though. Looks like it's actually secured from below, so I won't be able to lift it up.
It's definitely secure being where it is.
It is.
Behind the, yeah.
That's a good point. JR is making a point that the only way to get to this hatch is to go through the captain's cabin. So if there was money stored on the ship, if there was food items or something like that stored in the ship, no one's going to be able to steal that because they would have to go through the captain's cabin to get to this hatch. So it's a very strategically placed hatch down there too, because it's directly underneath the upper hatch here. One thing I can show you though, should we go out and in, or can we fit through there, do you think?
Where are we going?
Through that opening, or we can go out and around? Okay, so we're going to take you into another normally closed off area. Forget my hat. All right. Do you want to show the bathtub real quick, JR? All right, so the captain's bathroom, or a captain's head, which is literally the only head that's not at the head of the ship. That's where that phrase comes from. On sailing ships, you normally went to the front or head of the ship, because on a wind-powered ship, all the smells and sewage would get blown away as long as you were at the front or head of the ship. So whenever you needed to relieve yourself, you went to the head of the ship to relieve yourself, because wind usually comes from the back and blows towards the front. But the captain's head in this case is actually right here in the captain's living space. You can see his toilet here. You can also see he's got a full-fledged bathtub, which is actually quite deep. All right, so about that deep. And they probably would fill it only about halfway, because if the ship's leaning because of the wind on the sails, or if it's rocking during maybe slightly heavier weather, you don't want that water to slosh over the side. So you probably would fill it about halfway, and that's the reason the tub itself is so deep. But there is some evidence, and we don't know this 100%, but there is little evidence. If you look in the corner here, you see that little pipe. Here, I'll let you get up close. In the very corner there, there's a pipe that goes into the wall, and then later we discovered it goes up into the ceiling area. And we can't see anything up on deck from it. And that's probably due to just years and years and years of the changes the ship went through. But what we think that pipe is might have been a way to funnel rainwater down into this tub. So that might have been one of the main ways they got water into here. Or perhaps, and just as easily, it might have been a way they would have used seawater, because bathing in seawater back then was very, very common, even on land. So they could have easily gotten buckets of seawater off the side of the ship, poured it into a funnel down that pipe, and helped fill up this tub. Maybe one more secret little area here.
This is really great.
It's beautiful.
I'm glad you're liking it, guys. No, that one's a changed. Why don't you wait here? I'm going to step inside from the other side.
Don't forget your hat.
Thank you. I got to come back. That's on the outside of the gate, so I'm going to try to squeeze through that tight space before you hear me grunting. I'm just trying to get through it. Hold my breath. Oh, there we go. Well, you know what, JR? We're not going to be able to see what I was hoping we could see.
Nice photo. Captain and Mrs. Robert Tapley, St. James, 1898.
And his little dog, too. All right, stand by. JR is going to tell me something, guys. Go ahead.
I think I can unmute myself.
There you go.
Oh.
Hold on. Hold on 1 second.
All right. Nope. All right. We're seeing if Chris can unmute here so I can come in for a second. So I love this. Oh, Chris.
All right, so I don't know if you heard JR or not, but that dog there in the photo, he'd been working here for years. He was on a tour. Apparently a visitor asked him about the dog, and he looked at the photo, and he just had never, ever noticed the dog before. So he's making sure you guys see it, I guess, because he feels guilty about not having noticed it.
Hello, Zoe is here. Who's this?
I'm trying to get something visible here. I don't think I'm going to be very successful.
What are you looking for?
All right, well,
You're digging deep.
there's another hatch on the deck. Okay, so I'm just going to briefly mention it then. I'm not going to try to overexert myself.
Bye.
Bye, Zoe. So real quickly here, if you'll step in, JR, to the room. This is a space that used to be two different rooms. So the wall was probably somewhere right along here. You can't see another door right over there. And what I was trying to get at underneath the table and the boxes here is that there's actually a hatch in the deck right near that door. And most ships of this type would usually have maybe 3 officers. You'd have a captain, you'd have a first mate and a second mate. At least on average, you'd have those 3. But then there would be a 4th crew member working back here who was the steward. And the steward was basically the servant of the captain's living space. And we think that this cabin right in here might have been the steward's cabin. And the reason we think that is because down below this mess here, there is a hatch that's permanently sealed up. And we think that that hatchway would have given the steward access down to the food.
Oh, we're losing your sound a bit.
So to prepare, the cook would have had to come back to the captain's permission from the officers. Can you hear me? Officers and the steward to come through this space, because the only way to get down to the food probably was through that hatch right down, deliberately designed so that the sailors could not easily steal the valuables or the food on board the ship. So that's one story of this space here.
We can go down and look up at that.
That's true. JR just said we could go down and look up at the hatch, but we'll show you that next. But bear in mind, it would have been right through this space here.
I can go down there if you want to. If you want to close all this up, I can just go down.
Okay, go right ahead. So why don't you get outside the next door and then you can unmute. Okay.
All right, so Chris is going to lock up a lot of places where we just were since we opened a ton of doors, and be more interesting, I think, to see other parts of the ship than to watch Chris lock doors and gates. So we're going to head down to the next deck below us called the Tween Deck and go look at that hatch that we were just standing above. And yeah, all hatches are sealed up secure against all of our sailors. So we're down in what's known as the Tween Deck. There's another deck below us, all cargo space. This is where we have this big section of the ship set up as a museum. So when visitors come around, they can see all of this. But what I'm going to do here, we're at the very stern of the ship here. So we've got back there, when we were in that lazarette here, the shaft of the rudder coming down, it's just past that end of the wall there. So where that joint comes together, that rudder's on the other side of it.
And the hatch is right here. That one that's right by the rudder.
Oh yeah, so we were by a hatch, and it was here. I'll look up and down so you can see here. Get a little closer.
I muted Chris so we wouldn't get feedback. So
perfect. Thank you.
I figured out how to turn the microphone off anyway.
So there's that secure hatch that we were looking at that was right in front of the rudder. That was right below one in the deck. And then right below that is yet another one going to the space below us. So this space was very secure. And then I will look at two other things. So we're looking back down the length of the ship. I love this view.
Here's the hatch for Stuart.
Oh yeah, the whole point we came back here for, Stuart's hatch. So that's the hatch right there that Chris was trying to show us. So that's going up into that room that we were just in. You got one more secure hatch that is securely behind a door that is in the captain's living space. So yeah, this is if you needed to get in here, very hard to break into. And then yeah.
So you might point out that this wall here is just a museum wall. Historically, was gone all the way across.
Yeah, so Chris is pointing out this wall here that this would have gone all the way across. So the section that we are in right now would have been completely sealed off from the section that Chris is in there. It's just cargo one side, ship stuff on the other side. So that wall is just a museum wall here. So this space that we're in was, food, sails, whatever they needed to use for ship stuff, as opposed to what was being transported for profit, which is where we're moving into here, crossing the threshold. What time are we at, Chris? Do you got your phone? 11.
You better keep moving. Your signal's weak.
Coming in around our normal hour. But
that's better.
Should come in a little better as I get closer to this hatch. Ever the challenge of hanging out in the middle of a steel-hulled ship. Our signal always cuts in and out, as we all well know.
Good know.
Well, coming in at the end of the hour, what do you think there, Chris? Should we just do a quick pass through Tween Deck and call it good? How's everybody on your end feeling?
Yeah, everybody's good. Run through, show a bit of cargo, and then up on deck by the wheel. Perfect. And do a sign-off.
That sounds perfect to me. So yeah, we will we'll move through here, and my phone should at this point probably pick up Chris.
Your phone?
My phone mic. Can you guys hear Chris?
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
Good. We're more than 6 feet apart, which is always key right now. And we'll stay that way.
All right, so what I think I'll do is I'll just point a few things and then we'll walk and then we'll head up. But a few things that you'll notice around the various exhibits that we have, first and foremost, are these items that look like walls, but they're actually not because they're very see-through, right? But this is called Dunage, and it's basically meant to keep cargo where it is, so it doesn't shift around during heavy weather. You can imagine heavy cargo coming loose during a storm. If it all fell to one side of the ship, then the ship is destabilized and it could actually turn over. So this is a very vital element to being safe out there during a storm, and you'll see these Dunage setups here and there. But in between, you'll also get to see some of the cargo that we know the ship actually did carry. So everything that JR is going to show you, we know was actually carried on the ship at one point during her career. So again, I don't know how well this is coming through the camera, but there's a diverse amount of things. One of my favorites, this is a piano. So pianos came around Cape Horn, right? Fairly highly manufactured coming in from Europe. Behind JR, you'll find some more familiar objects. We got Cadbury Cocoa. We've got Coleman's mustard. We've also got wines, beers, and spirits. San Francisco was a sailor's town after all, so there's a lot of this coming in. We've also got construction material. On the other side here, we got boxes that contain large panes of glass for windows. And these barrels have cement for construction of buildings. So you got your building material and you got your windows here.
And I'm gonna point out the thing that I like to do when I'm in this spot. I'll get a little closer here, just to the break in the skylight here. So this is actually one of my favorite spots to stand on the ship because we're kind of near the middle of it, and so you can look all the way forward, all the way up. It gets really light up there. I know on our screens it's a little hard to see, but that's getting pretty far forward of the front of the ship. Oh yeah, Chris will walk back there. This is great. So as he keeps cruising back that way, he's going into an area that is now used as a, we use it for kind of doing work on the ship, but it would have been still open and cargo space there. So all the way forward up there, almost to the front of the ship. And I'm just going to do a quick camera flip here so we can see where we're standing. We can see clear the end of the ship way back there. And I really love this view because it shows just how big this ship is. So yeah, it's a massive, massive thing that we're in from stem to stern. And I think this really gives us a good sense of kind of space and volume when we're in here. As we walk around as a museum, we've got plenty of places set up for us to move around, but there would have been absolutely no empty space down here whatsoever. Everything would have been completely packed in. So yeah, I just kind of love this spot. Really showcases the sheer size. I also like it because this is our main mast, kind of right where we came aboard, coming through the ship there. But yeah, we'll head back out into daylight.
We're going to do that by going up these stairways, but suffice it to say, this is modern.
Yeah.
This is the original way that we down in here to load cargo. A vertical ladder takes up a lot less cargo space than the modern stairway does.
And what we are below is our main cargo hatch. So everything above us, all this wood here pulls out. So all of it is slatted, so you can just pull it on out. So this would be a giant hole in the ship to load things into. And what we are standing on, what the ladder Chris is on, goes over. And all these red planks down here as well that we're standing on. All of this also pulls out so you can get access down there to the lower hold as well. So this could just be a giant hole in the ship. Convenient spot to put a stairway. Ooh, perfect. I'm on low battery warning.
All right, get to the wheel and wherever you like, and
Yeah, we can head on back to the wheel there. Going to, as we go up this stairway, so this wall here is known as a bulwark. It blocks a lot of the wind. As we go up, that bulwark goes away. And the wind is really picked up, so it might be too windy up there.
okay, well, do it. Sign off for it. Have Chris come down then and do it there.
All right, we can do it from here.
Do it from down there?
Oh,
Do it from down there?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm up for either. So I can give this a try if you want, or we can just do it down there.
Okay.
So you might want to let John know to unmute me if he still has to unmute.
You're good.
All right. Like there's still some wind, but hopefully it's not too bad.
It's pretty good.
All right.
All right.
Yeah, fog's getting worse today.
All right.
You hear that camera sound, John? Is that what you're after?
You're good. You're good. No wind.
All right. So thank you guys very, very much for touring around with us today. Our first one on the pier, at least in a while.
Well, thanks very
Thank
much.
you.
Wonderful.
Enjoyed it.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everybody. You stay safe.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next time.
Okay. Thanks,
Okay.
Chris. See you, JR.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Perfect.
Be
I was-
safe, everybody.